Would you believe that in the history of the Olympics, a gold medalist was once forced to drink a cocktail of raw eggs, alcohol, and literal rat poison just to finish the race? No, this isn't a fiction movie. Welcome to the craziest, most dangerous race in human history, the 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon. Out of 32 athletes who lined up at the start, only 14 officially crossed the finish line. What happened to the rest? Let's find out.
The date was August 30th, 1904. The place? St. Louis, Missouri. The afternoon was brutally hot, with temperatures hovering around 90 degrees Fahrenheit along with suffocating humidity. At exactly 3:03 p.m., 32 runners lined up on an unpaved, dusty country road.
But the weather wasn't the biggest threat. The race officials were. The sports director of the event, James Sullivan, was testing a bizarre sports science theory of his time. He believed that limiting fluid intake during intense exercise actually improved an athlete's endurance. Because of this fatal rule, there were only 2 water sources on the entire 24-mile course, a water tower at mile 6 and a ground well near the halfway mark. For the rest of the race, the runners were completely on their own.
Because international travel was expensive in 1904, the starting lineup was wild. Meet Felix Carvajal, a mailman from Cuba. He didn't have athletic gear. He showed up in his everyday clothes, long trousers, heavy walking shoes, and a beret. Feeling sorry for him, a fellow athlete took a pair of scissors and cut Carvajal's pants at the knees right there at the starting line, just to give him some leg room.
This race also made history by including the first black African Olympians, Len Tanyani and Jan Mashani. They weren't scouted athletes. They were actually in town performing at the St. Louis World Fair exhibit and decided to join the marathon last minute. Tanyani didn't even have shoes. He ran the entire jagged, rocky course completely barefoot. The moment the race began, the course turned into a living nightmare. Open-top automobiles carrying officials and doctors drove directly in front of the runners, kicking up blinding, suffocating clouds of stone dust from the unpaved roads. Instead of oxygen, the athletes began inhaling pure gravel. A runner named William Garcia inhaled so much of this abrasive grit that it tore through his respiratory lining. He was found unconscious on the side of the road, bleeding internally from his lungs. Doctors later confirmed that if he had been left there for another hour, he would have died. Even the favorites couldn't survive it. John Lorden, a previous Boston Marathon winner, was hit with violent vomiting at mile 10 and quit. Sam Meller, another champion, took the lead but collapsed at mile 16 with crippling muscle cramps due to severe dehydration. The course was literally breaking them. By mile 9, a New York bricklayer named Fred Lors had also had enough. Suffering from intense cramps, he decided to drop out. He waved down his support car, hopped into the passenger seat, and spent the next 11 miles relaxing, drinking water, and waving at the other suffering runners as he drove past them.
But at mile 20, the car engine broke down. Feeling rested, Lords decided to jog the remaining 5 miles back to the stadium. He crossed the finish line first, and the crowd went wild. The president's daughter, Alice Roosevelt, was about to put the gold medal around his neck when eyewitnesses suddenly shouted, "Wait! He cheated! He was in a car!" Lords casually laughed it off, claiming it was just a practical joke.
While Lors was pulling his prank, the actual race leader, Thomas Hicks, was reaching the limits of human endurance. At mile 20, he was completely exhausted and begged for water. Adhering to the strict water ban, his team refused. Instead, they mixed a tiny dose of strychnine sulfate, yes, rat poison, with raw egg whites and brandy. In the early 20th century, strychnine was used in microscopic doses as a medical stimulant. It worked, but it had horrifying side effects. Hicks became heavily disoriented. He began hallucinating, believing the finish line was still miles away. His skin turned a ghostly gray. He was running with a completely rigid, mechanical gait, a literal zombie powered by poison. In the final mile, Hicks couldn't even lift his own body. His trainers grabbed him by the arms and physically carried him across the finish line while his feet shuffled in the air. He was declared the winner with a time of 3 hours and 28 minutes, the slowest winning marathon time in Olympic history. Hicks collapsed immediately. It took a team of physicians over an hour to stabilize his vitals, just so he could leave the stadium. This disastrous race almost caused the Olympic Committee to ban the marathon forever. Instead, it became a dark, historical turning point that eventually led to modern athlete safety laws and strict anti-doping regulations. If you enjoyed this wild piece of history, told in whiteboard style on DK Access, make sure to smash that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, what historical event should we draw next?